I watched as my stepfather crushed the memory card in his fist, years of hidden evidence scattered across the polished hardwood floor of our Boston townhouse. The look in his eyes wasn't rage. It was calculated triumph. "Catherine never loved you, Ethan," he sneered, his perfectly tailored suit barely containing the contempt radiating from him. "She abandoned you because you were too much trouble. Just like everyone will. That was 5 years ago. Yesterday he called me 37 times from rehab claiming he's a changed man. But the voice messages couldn't hide the tremor of desperation. He needs something from me. And for the first time in my life, I have the power to say no. The first message came at 6:17 a.m. I was already awake, preparing for my morning lecture at the university. My phone vibrated against the nightstand, an unfamiliar number with our old area code. Something made me answer it. "Ethan?" The voice was thinner than I remembered, lacking the authoritative boom that once made me flinch. It's Richard." I almost dropped the phone. 5 years of silence, and now this? I hung up without speaking. The phone rang again immediately, but I let it go to voicemail. Then again, and again. By the time I left for class, there were 12 missed calls and 7 messages. I listened to the first one in my car, my hands shaking slightly as I pressed play. "Ethan, please. I'm at Silver Pines Recovery Center. I've been here for 3 months. I'm working the steps. I need to make amends. Please call me back." The second, "I know I don't deserve your time, but I'm dying, Ethan. Liver failure. The doctors say 6 months, maybe less. I just want to talk to you once before the message cut off." I turned off my phone and taught my class on developmental psychology, discussing the impact of childhood trauma with steady composure while my own past clawed at my insides. My students never suspected their professor was unraveling with each word about familial bonds and betrayal. By evening, the count had reached 37 calls. I sat in my apartment, Madison asleep in the next room, and listened to them all. His voice grew more desperate with each one. The cool manipulation of the first few messages giving way to something raw and unfamiliar, genuine fear. The final message was different. "You know what? Forget it. You're just like your mother. Selfish to the core. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me? By letting me die alone? Fine. I don't need your forgiveness. I don't need anything from you." There it was. The Richard the first knew. The mask always slipped eventually. I stared at my phone for a long time, then pulled out the key to my safe deposit box. Inside the box was the evidence I'd collected over years, photos, recordings, documents, proof that I wasn't crazy, that what happened was real. I'd never shown it to Madison. Never showed it to anyone except the lawyers and the judge. Some burdens don't need sharing. But tonight, I unlocked the metal box containing my past and began to sort through it, arranging the fragments of my shattered childhood in chronological order on our dining table. Madison found me there at 3 a.m., surrounded by paper and memory cards. "Ethan?" She touched my shoulder gently. "What are you doing?" Richard called. "He's dying." My voice sounded distant, even to myself. She sat across from me, her dark eyes studying my face. "Are you okay?" I wasn't sure how to answer. Was I okay? I had built a life, a good one. I was Dr. Ethan Miller now, with a PhD in psychology and a position at a prestigious university. I had Madison, who knew my scars without needing to see the wounds that caused them. I had my mother back, stronger than ever, married to a man who treated her with kindness and respect. But one phone call had me digging through a box of pain at 3 a.m. "He wants to make amends," I said finally. Madison picked up one of the photographs. Me at 10 years old, eyes hollow, standing next to Richard at some charity function, his hand gripping my shoulder with white-knuckle force. The camera had captured what most people missed. The subtle control, the ownership. "What do you want to do?" she asked. That was the question, wasn't it? What did I want? To confront him? To forgive him? To watch him die? "I want to understand," I said, surprising myself. I've spent years helping other people make sense of their trauma, writing papers on parental alienation and psychological manipulation. But I've never truly understood why he did what he did to me. To my mother. Madison nodded. She understood the academic in me, the need to categorize and analyze. Will seeing him give you that understanding? I didn't know. But I knew I wouldn't find the answer in this box. I'm going to see him, I decided. Not today. Not tomorrow. But soon. She squeezed my hand. "I'll go with you." I shook my head. This is something I need to do alone. As I packed away the evidence of my past, my mind drifted back to where it all began. Not with the memory card being crushed beneath Richard's Italian leather shoe, but earlier when I still had a chance at a normal childhood. I was 8 years old when my world first fractured. My mother, Catherine, sat me down in our sun-drenched breakfast nook, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. "Ethan, sweetheart, I need to tell you something important. Your stepfather and I are getting a divorce." I remember feeling relief. Even at 8, I knew our home wasn't right. The silence at dinner tables, punctuated only by the scrape of silver against fine china. The muffled arguments behind closed doors that ended with my mother's soft crying. The way Richard's smile never quite reached his eyes when he looked at her. "Does this mean we're moving?" I asked, thinking of my friends, my school. We'll figure everything out, she promised, pulling me into a hug that smelled of her jasmine perfume and safety. But things will be better now. You'll see. For a while, she was right. The first weeks after Richard moved out were like breathing fresh air after years underwater. My mother laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was so unfamiliar it startled me. We ordered pizza and ate it on the living room floor while watching movies Richard had deemed mindless entertainment. We made plans for Christmas, for summer vacation, for a future that felt open and possible. Then came the custody arrangement. I would spend weekdays with my mother and weekends with Richard. Just until everything settled, the adults said, as if children can't sense when adults are hiding the truth. The first weekend at Richard's new penthouse apartment overlooking Boston Harbor was awkward but bearable. He ordered expensive takeout, bought me a new video game, asked about school with stiff formality. Your mother's filling your head with nonsense, he said casually as we ate sushi at his glass dining table. She's never understood what's best for you, but I do. I always have. I nodded because it was easier than disagreeing. I was still learning the rules of this new arrangement. That first Christmas after the separation, my mother saved up for months to buy me the gaming system I'd been dreaming about. When I opened it Christmas morning, her face lit up with my excitement. This is the best present ever. I threw my arms around her neck, breathing in jasmine and safety once more. You deserve it, sweetheart. You've been so brave this year. The next day, Richard picked me up for his share of the holiday. His apartment was decorated by professionals, a perfect tree, perfect lights, perfect wrapped boxes that contained expensive clothes I didn't want and books I wouldn't read. There was no gaming system. Your mother bought you what? His voice was soft, dangerous. An Xbox. I said, my excitement already fading. I knew that tone. Of course she did. He shook his head. She's trying to buy your love, Ethan. Don't you see that? She feels guilty for destroying our family, so she's compensating with expensive gifts. I didn't understand then. I was 8 and I just wanted to play my new games. When I returned to my mother's house after the weekend, the gaming system was gone. Richard came by, she explained, her voice tight. He said it wasn't appropriate, that we needed to discuss big purchases like that. He took it back to his place for you to use there. I never saw it again. The next time I visited Richard, he presented me with a watch. Not a toy watch, a real one, with a black leather band and a heavy face that looked out of place on my small wrist. This is a sign of my trust in you, he said, fastening it carefully. It's very expensive, so be careful with it. As long as you wear this, I'll know you're thinking of me, even when you're at your mother's. I didn't understand until years later that the watch contained a GPS tracker. The alienation happened so gradually I barely noticed it. A comment here about how my mother was unstable. A suggestion there that she didn't really want me around. Small seeds of doubt planted and watered with expert precision. She didn't even fight for full custody. He told me one night as I was getting ready for bed in my room at his apartment. Did you know that? She was happy to give you up half the time. I was 9 by then and the lie took root. Why wouldn't she want me all the time? Didn't she love me enough? When I asked her about it, her face crumpled. Ethan, that's not true. I wanted full custody. But the courts... Richard said you didn't even try, I interrupted, watching her face for signs of deception like Richard had taught me. He's lying to you, she said firmly. I would never give you up willingly. But the seed was already growing. The weekend visits with Richard gradually extended. A Sunday night became a Monday morning because it's easier for school. A long weekend became a week because your mother needs space. Soon, I was living primarily with Richard, seeing my mother only on supervised visits that grew increasingly tense and infrequent. By the time I was 12, Richard had transferred me to Westford Academy, an elite private school near his Beacon Hill townhouse. The move effectively cut me off from friends I'd made in my mother's neighborhood and placed me in an environment Richard controlled completely. He joined the school board, donated a new science wing, became indispensable to the administration. The isolation was complete when he showed me my mother's Facebook profile one evening. There she was, smiling next to a man I didn't recognize, her arms around a little girl who wasn't me. She has a new family now, Richard said gently, his hand on my shoulder. A new child. That's why she doesn't fight harder to see you. I stared at the photo, feeling something break inside me. Who are they? Her boyfriend Mark and his daughter. They live together now. He closed the laptop. I didn't want to tell you. But you deserve to know the truth. I didn't cry. By then, I'd learned that tears angered Richard. Instead, I nodded and retreated to my room where I stared at the ceiling until morning. Years later, I would discover the truth. The man was my uncle, my mother's brother, who had been helping her fight for custody. The little girl was my cousin. My mother had never stopped fighting for me. Richard had simply made sure her efforts never reached me. But by then, the damage was done. I had become Richard's perfect protege. Distrustful, cynical, emotionally closed off. I excelled academically because it pleased him. I played the sports he chose because it made him proud. I dated the girls he approved of because it was easier than defying him. And all the while, my mother's letters were intercepted, her calls blocked, her court petitions buried by Richard's expensive lawyers. The facade cracked when I was 16. Richard had been drinking more heavily, the careful control slipping as his business faced SEC scrutiny. One night, he crashed his Porsche into the front of an upscale boutique in Back Bay. No one was hurt, but it made the local news. I was sitting in the hospital waiting room, watching him charm the doctors and the police officers who had responded to the scene. He would face no consequences, he never did. His attorneys were already spinning the narrative: mechanical failure, poor lighting, anything but the 3 martinis he'd had at lunch. While he was occupied, I found a payphone in the hospital corridor. I didn't know my mother's number by heart anymore. Richard had made sure of that, but I knew my uncle's. My fingers trembled as I dialed. Hello? His voice was exactly as I remembered. Uncle Jack? It's Ethan. The silence was so long I thought he'd hung up. Then Ethan. Oh my God. Are you okay? Where are you? I'm at Massachusetts General. Richard had an accident. He's fine, but... I trailed off, unsure what I was asking for. Stay there, he said firmly. I'm coming to get you. No. The panic in my voice surprised even me. No, don't come. Richard can't know I called. Just, can you give me my mom's number? He did, and I memorized it instantly, repeating it in my head like a prayer. I called her from a different payphone, one in the hospital cafeteria. Hello. Her voice hit me like a physical force. It had been years since I'd heard it. Mom? My voice cracked on the word. Ethan? She sounded disbelieving. Ethan, is that you? Yeah, I managed. It's me. Where are you? Are you okay? I've been trying to reach you for years. Richard changed your number, moved you, the school wouldn't tell me. I know, I cut her off, glancing over my shoulder. I know now. He lied about everything, didn't he? She was quiet for a moment. Yes, she said finally. He did. He showed me pictures of you and Uncle Jack and Emma. Said you had a new family. Her intake of breath was sharp. Oh, Ethan. No. Jack has been helping me fight for you. I've never stopped fighting for you. Not for one day. Something inside me broke open, years of carefully constructed walls crumbling. I thought you didn't want me anymore. I have always wanted you, she said fiercely. You are everything to me. Everything. I heard footsteps approaching. I have to go. He's coming. I'll try to call again. Ethan, wait. Where are you? Let me come get you. Massachusetts General. But don't come here. He can't know I called you. Tell me where to meet you. Please, son. I thought quickly. The Boston Public Library. Next Sunday. Noon. I'll tell Richard I'm studying with friends. I'll be there, she promised. I love you, Ethan. I've never stopped loving you. I hung up just as Richard rounded the corner, his face flushed with victory and alcohol. There you are. Good news, no charges, and the insurance is covering everything. Let's go home. As I followed him to the waiting car, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Continuation, at least 3,500 words. The week that followed was the longest of my life. I moved through my days in a fog of anticipation and dread. Would she really be there? Would Richard somehow find out? What would happen when I saw her face to face after all these years? I crafted my lie carefully, knowing Richard would scrutinize every detail. A group study project at the library, preparation for the AP exams, names of classmates he approved of. I rehearsed it in my head until it felt almost true. Sunday arrived with agonizing slowness. Richard was nursing a hangover, barely glancing up from his financial papers as I explained my study plans. Be home by 6, he said, already losing interest. We have dinner with the Callahan family. Their daughter is home from Yale for the weekend. The Callahan's daughter, another pre-approved potential girlfriend who wouldn't threaten Richard's control. Of course, I agreed. Shouldering my backpack filled with textbooks I wouldn't open. I took the T to Copley Square, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure other passengers could hear it. The library loomed ahead, its grand facade both welcoming and intimidating. I checked my watch obsessively. The tracker Richard had given me was broken, replaced with a normal one I bought secretly with saved allowance money. At exactly noon, I climbed the steps and entered the main hall. The vaulted ceiling and hushed atmosphere usually calmed me, but not today. My eyes scanned the space frantically, looking for her. And then there she was. She sat at a table near the window, afternoon light haloing her blonde hair. She looked older, of course, lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, but her face was the same one that had haunted my dreams for years. She hadn't seen me yet. I stood frozen, suddenly terrified. What if she was disappointed in who I'd become? What if Richard was right, and she'd only come out of guilt? Then she looked up, and our eyes met across the room. The recognition, the love that flooded her face, it was like watching the sun rise after endless night. She stood so quickly her chair scraped loudly against the floor, earning sharp glances from nearby readers. I didn't care. I was moving toward her, and she was rushing to me, and then her arms were around me, jasmine and safety enveloping me once more. Ethan, she whispered into my hair. My beautiful boy. I had promised myself I wouldn't cry. Richard's voice in my head reminding me that men don't show weakness. But the tears came anyway, hot and unstoppable, soaking into the shoulder of her blouse. We held each other for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes until a librarian gently suggested we take our reunion elsewhere. We found a quiet cafe 2 blocks away. Sliding into a corner booth where Richard's acquaintances wouldn't see us. She couldn't stop looking at me, her eyes drinking in every detail. "You're so tall," she said. Her voice filled with wonder and grief. "I've missed so much." "He told me you didn't want me," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "That you were happy with your new family. That you never fought for custody." Her face hardened. "I have fought for you every day for 8 years. I've spent everything I have on lawyers. I've filed motion after motion. Richard has blocked me at every turn. Changed your phone numbers, moved you repeatedly, used his connections to keep me away from your school. He even filed a restraining order against me using fabricated evidence that I was unstable." "A restraining order?" The shock must have shown on my face. She nodded grimly. "He told the court I was a danger to you, that I had threatened to harm myself and you if I couldn't have full custody. He had witnesses, people he paid to lie. The judge granted it temporarily. And by the time I could prove it was false, the damage was done." The cafe around us continued its Sunday bustle, but I felt as if we were in a bubble of terrible truth. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about my mother, was collapsing. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Why would he do all this?" She sighed, a deep, bone-tired exhale. "Control. Richard can't stand losing anything, a business deal, an argument, and especially not his perfect family image. When I left him, it was the first time in his life someone had said no to him and made it stick. He couldn't accept that. So he took the one thing he knew would hurt me most, you. It made terrible sense. The Richard the first knew was obsessed with his public image, with winning at all costs. I was just another possession, another battle to be won. "I have something for you," she said, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a thick manila envelope. "Every letter I've written to you over the years. Every card for your birthday, for Christmas, for every milestone. All returned unopened." I took the envelope with trembling hands. It was heavy with years of one-sided communication. "And this." She handed me a small flash drive. "Court documents. Evidence I've gathered about Richard's manipulation, recordings of his threats to me. I've been building a case to reopen custody proceedings now that you're older and the court might consider your preference." I stared at the small device cradled in my palm. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that the past 8 years had been built on elaborate lies. "I'm almost 18, I said, the realization hitting me suddenly. "In less than a year, Richard won't have legal control anymore." Hope flickered in her eyes. "Yes, but that's still a year under his roof, Ethan. A year is a long time." She was right. Richard's control had only tightened as I'd grown older. His fear of losing his grip manifesting in stricter rules and closer surveillance. "What should I do?" I asked, feeling like a child again. Needing guidance. She reached across the table and took my hands in hers. "For now, be careful. Don't let him suspect you know the truth. We'll find ways to meet, to talk. And I'll keep fighting through the courts." My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Where are you? Jennifer Callahan is asking about you." I'd lost track of time, it was already 5:30. "I have to go," I said reluctantly, showing her the message. Fear flashed across her face. "Does he track your phone?" "Not this one," I assured her, showing her the prepaid device I'd purchased secretly. "My regular phone is in my locker at school with the tracking watch." Relief replaced fear. "You're smarter than I was at your age." She smiled sadly. "We'll get through this, Ethan. Together this time." We exchanged contact information, secure email addresses, the number for her new phone. I memorized her address in Cambridge. A small apartment she'd moved to after selling our old house to pay legal bills. As we stood to leave, she hugged me again, fierce and protective. "I love you, Ethan. Never doubt that." "I love you too, Mom." The words felt rusty from disuse, but no less true. I made it back to Richard's townhouse with minutes to spare, slipping in through the side door and rushing to change for dinner. My mind was reeling, processing everything I'd learned. But I forced my face into a neutral expression before joining Richard in the foyer. "How was studying?" he asked absently, adjusting his Italian silk tie in the hallway mirror. "Productive?" I replied, the lie coming easily. "I think I'm ready for the AP exams now." He nodded approvingly, his attention already moving to the evening ahead. "The Callaghan's are important connections. Ethan, Jennifer is exactly the kind of girl you should be spending time with. Intelligent family, good breeding." I suppressed a grimace at his phrasing. Of course. That night began a dangerous double life. On the surface, I remained Richard's perfect protege, excelling at school, socializing with approved peers, participating in the right extracurriculars. But beneath this compliance, I was gathering evidence, meeting my mother whenever possible, and planning my escape. We established a routine. Every Sunday, I would study at the library, spending precious hours with her instead. She showed me the stack of legal papers, the motions denied, the appeals rejected, all bearing Richard's invisible influence. I learned about her life during our years apart, how she'd rebuilt her architecture career from scratch after Richard blacklisted her at major firms, How she'd moved into a tiny apartment to afford the legal fees, how she'd never given up hope of getting me back. I shared bits of my life too, carefully edited to spare her pain. I didn't tell her about the nights Richard came home drunk and raged about her betrayal. I didn't mention the times he'd locked me in my room for minor infractions like talking to an unapproved classmate. Some burdens didn't need sharing. For weeks into our secret meetings, Richard almost caught us. We were leaving the cafe when his Bentley glided past on the adjacent street. I pulled my mother into a bookstore doorway just in time. Heart pounding as we watched him park and enter an upscale restaurant across the street. "That was close," I whispered, still pressed against the storefront. She nodded. Fear etched in the lines around her eyes. "Too close. We need to be more careful." We changed our meeting spot after that, choosing a small coffee shop near MIT where Richard would never go, too liberal, too intellectual for his taste. I continued to build my evidence file, storing the flash drive in a hollowed-out history textbook. As months passed, the strain of my double life began to show. I lost weight, developed insomnia, jumped at unexpected sounds. Richard noticed. Of course, he noticed everything. "You seem distracted lately," he commented one evening as we ate dinner in the formal dining room. The distance between us marked by 3 feet of polished mahogany. "Is something bothering you?" I kept my eyes on my plate, cutting my steak into precise, even pieces. "Just stress about college applications." He nodded, accepting this reasonable explanation. "You need only concern yourself with Harvard, Yale, and perhaps Princeton. I've already spoken to my contacts at the admissions offices." Of course he had. Every aspect of my future was mapped according to his design, each path leading back to his control. "Actually," I said, surprising myself, "I've been thinking about Northwestern. They have an excellent psychology program." Richard's knife paused midway through his steak. "Psychology? When did this interest develop?" I had said too much. "It's just an option I'm considering. Their business school is also highly ranked." This mollified him slightly. "Well, Chicago is hardly Boston, but Northwestern has a certain respectability. We can discuss it." Which meant he would research how to control me from a distance, establish connections there, ensure his influence remained intact. The confrontation came 3 weeks before my 18th birthday. I had grown careless, perhaps subconsciously testing boundaries as freedom approached. I left my alternative phone on my desk instead of hiding it in its usual spot inside a hollowed-out copy of The Great Gatsby. Richard found it during one of his room inspections, invasions of privacy he conducted regularly under the guise of concern. I returned from track practice to find him sitting in my desk chair, the phone in his hand, texts from my mother displayed on the screen. "Explain this," he said, his voice deadly calm. There was no point denying it. The evidence was literally in his hand, dozens of messages between my mother and me, plans to meet, expressions of love, discussions about the future. "She's my mother," I said simply, dropping my gym bag to the floor. "I wanted to know her. After everything she did to us?" His voice remained controlled, which was more frightening than his shouting. "After she abandoned you? Tried to poison you against me? Created this fiction about me keeping her from you?" "It's not fiction." I was surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "I've seen the court documents. I know what you did." His expression shifted subtly, calculation replacing rage. "What documents? What has she shown you?" "Everything. The custody hearings, the restraining order you fabricated, the witnesses you paid off." He stood slowly, placing the phone on my desk with deliberate care. "I see. So you've made your choice. You believe her lies over the evidence of your own life. The life I've given you. You've given me a gilded cage," I replied, years of suppressed truth surging forth. "You've controlled every aspect of my existence, isolated me, manipulated me, made me hate my own mother." He moved toward me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't back away. I stood my ground as he stopped inches from my face. "I have done everything for you," he hissed, spittle landing on my cheek. "Every opportunity, every advantage, all provided by me. And this is your gratitude. You did it for yourself," I said, the realization crystallizing as I spoke. "To win, to prove you could take me from her. I was never a son to you, I was a trophy." The blow came so fast I didn't see it until I was on the floor, my cheek throbbing where his ring had connected with my face. In 17 years, Richard had never hit me. He preferred psychological warfare to physical confrontation. "Where is it?" he demanded, standing over me. "The evidence. The flash drive she gave you. Where are you hiding it?" I tasted blood in my mouth but remained silent. He tore through my room then, methodically at first, then with increasing frenzy as he found nothing. He pulled books from shelves, emptied drawers, flipped my mattress. I watched from the floor, oddly detached from the destruction. Finally, he found it, the hollowed-out history book on my bookshelf. He extracted the flash drive with a triumphant sneer. "Did you really think you could outsmart me?" he asked, dangling the device before me. "I made you, Ethan. Everything you are comes from me." He closed his fist around the flash drive and crushed it, electronic components splintering with a sickening crack. The pieces fell to the floor between us, scattering across the polished hardwood. "Catherine never loved you, Ethan," he said, his voice returning to its usual controlled tone. "She abandoned you because you were too much trouble. Just like everyone will." I looked up at him from the floor, this man who had shaped my world through lies and manipulation, and felt something shift inside me. Not fear. Not even anger. Something cleaner, clearer understanding. You're wrong, I said quietly. And I pity you. Confusion flickered across his face, quickly replaced by contempt. Spare me your amateur psychology. Pack a bag. We're leaving for the lake house tonight. I think some time away from distractions would be beneficial. The lake house in New Hampshire was isolated, miles from the nearest neighbor. A beautiful prison. No, I said, rising to my feet. I'm not going anywhere with you. He laughed, a short, ugly sound. You're 17, Ethan. You'll do as I say until the law says otherwise. Then call the police, I challenged. Have me dragged away. Explain the bruise on my face. The state of this room. I'm sure that will look wonderful in the Boston Globe. Prominent businessman Richard Harrington abusing his stepson. His eyes narrowed. He was calculating again. Weighing options, potential damage to his reputation. One phone call, I continued, gaining confidence, and my mother will be here with lawyers and photographers. Is that what you want? Your business associates seeing the side of you. It was a bluff. I had no way of knowing if my mother could muster lawyers that quickly. But Richard lived in fear of public humiliation. Of losing his carefully constructed image. This conversation isn't over, he said finally, stepping back. But I have a dinner engagement I cannot miss. We'll discuss your attitude when I return. He left, closing the door with careful control rather than slamming it. I knew I had only hours before he returned. Likely with a plan to remove me to the lake house regardless of my wishes. My hands shaking, I pulled out my secret phone and called my mother. He knows, I said without preamble. He found the phone, destroyed the flash drive. He's planning to take me to New Hampshire tonight. I'm on my way, she said immediately. Pack whatever you need. We're implementing the contingency plan. The contingency plan was something we'd discussed but never thought we'd need, an emergency strategy if Richard discovered our communication. It involved a temporary restraining order her lawyer had prepared based on the bruises Richard had left on my arm during a particularly vicious argument months earlier. I had photographed them. Sent them to my mother as insurance. I packed quickly, taking only what mattered. Clothes, my laptop, the few photographs I had of my mother and me from before the divorce. As I zipped the bag, I glanced at the broken flash drive on the floor. Richard thought he'd destroyed the evidence, but he'd made a critical error. I had backed everything up to a secure cloud account. Accessible from anywhere. My mother arrived 30 minutes later with her lawyer, a stern-faced woman named Patricia Reynolds, and a police officer. The restraining order was served in my presence, temporarily barring Richard from contacting me pending a hearing. The officer documented the state of my room, the bruise forming on my face, took my statement with professional detachment. I left Richard's townhouse that night and never slept there again. The following weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, therapy appointments, and adjustment to life with my mother. Richard fought back, of course, unleashing his legal team with vindictive fury. But I was nearly 18 and the courts gave significant weight to my testimony. The evidence I'd saved to the cloud, recordings of his threats, documentation of his manipulation, years of systematic alienation painted a damning picture. 2 days before my 18th birthday, the judge issued her final ruling. The restraining order against Richard would remain permanent. His parental rights, already tenuous as a stepfather, were formally terminated. I was free. Richard didn't attend the hearing. His lawyer presented a statement expressing deep concern for Ethan's mental well-being and hope that he would seek the help he clearly needed. Even in defeat, he attempted to control the narrative. On my 18th birthday, I woke in my small but sun-filled room in my mother's Cambridge apartment. For the first time in almost a decade, I felt truly safe. There was a package waiting for me at breakfast, a new gaming system, the same model my mother had given me all those years ago. I know you're probably too old for it now, she said hesitantly. But I wanted to replace what he took from you. I hugged her tightly, breathing in jasmine and safety. It's perfect. We spent the day playing games together. Her cheerful incompetence making me laugh until my sides hurt. She kept passing to the wrong team in FIFA, apologizing between fits of giggles. That sound, my mother's genuine laughter, was the best birthday gift I could have received. I should probably start learning these games if we're going to make this a tradition, she said, abandoning the controller to reach for her coffee mug. A tradition? I liked the sound of that, something stable, ongoing, built by choice rather than coercion. If you want, she said carefully. I know you'll be busy with college soon, but maybe holidays or every Sunday, I said firmly. Like we've been doing, just without the secrecy. Her smile could have lit the entire city of Boston. The following months established a new normal. I finished my senior year at a public school near my mother's apartment, away from Richard's sphere of influence. I made real friends for the first time in years. People who liked me for myself rather than my connection to Richard's wealth or power. I even started dating a girl named Madison from my AP psychology class. A relationship based on mutual interest rather than Richard's approval. When college acceptance letters arrived, I chose Northwestern, not because Richard had suggested it, but because their psychology program genuinely excited me. My mother supported my decision without hesitation, even though it meant I would be miles away from her just as we'd reunited. This is what healing looks like, she told me. Making choices because they're right for you, not in reaction to what he wanted. She was right. Every decision I made without Richard's shadow hanging over me felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I cut my hair shorter than he would have allowed. I took up rock climbing, an activity he would have deemed too dangerous. I applied for scholarships and worked part-time at a coffee shop to help with expenses, developing a work ethic Richard's wealth had made unnecessary. The summer before college was the happiest of my life. My mother and I took a road trip along the coast, staying in cheap motels, eating at diners, taking Polaroid pictures of ourselves making silly faces at famous landmarks. We talked endlessly, filling in the gaps of our lost years, rebuilding the foundation of our relationship. One night, sitting on a beach watching the sunset, she asked the question I knew had been weighing on her. Do you think you'll ever speak to Richard again? I dug my toes into the cool sand, considering. I don't know. Part of me wants to confront him, make him admit what he did. But another part thinks that's just giving him more power over me. She nodded, understanding. Forgiveness isn't about absolving him, you know. It's about freeing yourself. I'm not there yet, I admitted. You don't have to be, she assured me, squeezing my shoulder. Some wounds take longer to heal than others. When August came and it was time to leave for Northwestern, I hugged my mother at the airport gate, trying to memorize the feeling of safety in her arms. I'm proud of you, she whispered. So proud. I'll call every day, I promised. Every other day is fine, she laughed. You need to live your life, Ethan. I did just that at Northwestern. I threw myself into my studies, discovering a passion for developmental psychology that would eventually shape my career. I made friends who knew nothing about my past, who liked me for who I was becoming rather than who I had been. Madison and I conducted a long-distance relationship that survived because we both prioritized honest communication, a concept alien to my life with Richard. Richard attempted contact twice during my freshman year. The first was a letter sent to my dorm, filled with subtle manipulations disguised as concern. I recognized the tactics immediately, the implied guilt, the veiled threats about my future, the reminders of all he'd done for me. I threw it away without responding. The second attempt was more direct. He showed up at my dorm unannounced during parents' weekend, his Bentley conspicuous among the modest family sedans. I was returning from the library when I saw him standing in the courtyard, scanning the passing students for my face. I could have turned around, avoided the confrontation. Instead, I approached him directly, stopping a few feet away, close enough to talk, far enough to maintain my boundaries. Richard, I said, my voice steady. You're violating the restraining order. He looked older than I remembered, lines etched deeper around his eyes. His suit was impeccable as always, but it hung slightly loose on his frame, as if he'd lost weight. I needed to see you, he said, his voice lacking its usual authority. To explain. Explain what? How you manipulated and isolated a child. How you lied to me for years about my own mother. How you fabricated evidence to keep her away from me. Each question was a dart, finding its target in his flinching expression. I did what I thought was best for you, he insisted. But the words sounded hollow even to him, I suspect. Catherine was unstable. You don't remember how she was after the divorce. Stop. I cut him off. I've seen the court records. The real ones. Not the edited versions you showed me. Mom was never unstable. You made that up to control me. Students and parents flowed around us, some glancing curiously at our tense confrontation. You don't understand what it's like to lose everything, he said, his voice dropping. When she left, took you with her. I couldn't let that stand. For the first time, I glimpsed the broken core beneath Richard's controlled exterior, the desperate fear of abandonment that drove him to such extremes. I was a child, I said quietly. Not a possession. Not a prize to be won. A child who needed both parents. He had no answer for that. You should leave, I continued. If campus security sees you, they'll call the police. He stood straighter, attempting to regain his dignity. I've made mistakes, Ethan. I acknowledge that. But I'm still the man who raised you. No, I corrected him. You're the man who controlled me. There's a difference. I walked past him then, feeling his eyes on my back but not turning around. It was the last time I saw him in person for over 3 years. College became my sanctuary. A place to rebuild myself free from Richard's influence. I excelled academically, earning fellowships and research opportunities that had nothing to do with Richard's connections. I strengthened my relationship with my mother, flying home for holidays and long weekends, continuing our Sunday gaming tradition via video calls when distance separated us. Madison transferred to Northwestern in our junior year, her own interest in neuroscience bringing her to the same campus. We moved into a small apartment together, learning the rhythms of shared daily life. She understood my past without letting it define our future. When nightmares woke me, she was there, patient and steady. When unexpected triggers, a certain cologne, a phrase Richard used to say, sent me spiraling, she knew when to hold me and when to give me space. I graduated summa cum laude and entered Northwestern's doctoral program in clinical psychology, focusing on childhood trauma and parental alienation. My experiences with Richard weren't just scars, they became the foundation of my life's work. I conducted research, published papers, spoke at conferences about the devastating impact of psychological manipulation on developing minds. My mother flourished too. With the legal battles finally behind her, she rebuilt her architecture practice, specializing in community spaces that brought people together. She married Paul, a kind-hearted literature professor who looked at her like she hung the moon. They bought a small house with a garden where my mother grew herbs and flowers, healing through connection to growing things. Richard kept his distance. Whether out of respect for the restraining order or pride, I couldn't be sure. But while he was physically absent, his influence lingered in the way I sometimes struggled to trust. In the nightmares that still occasionally plagued my sleep, in my hypervigilance about control in my relationships. The call came during the final year of my doctoral program. Richard was in the hospital, liver failure, the culmination of years of functioning alcoholism hidden beneath his polished exterior. He had listed me as his emergency contact. A final manipulation, or perhaps a desperate hope for reconciliation. The doctor was clinical in her assessment. 6 months at most without a transplant. And Richard wasn't a candidate due to his continued drinking despite warnings. He was asking for me. I sat in my office at the university, the phone heavy in my hand after ending the call. On my desk were student papers about attachment theory, the very psychological principles Richard had weaponized against me. On the wall hung my degrees and publications. Achievements that had nothing to do with him. On my finger was the engagement ring I had given Madison the previous month. Symbol of a future built on trust rather than control. Did I owe Richard anything? A visit? Forgiveness? The chance to make amends before he died? Or would seeing him simply reopen wounds that had finally begun to heal? I called my mother first. I can't tell you what to do, she said after listening to my dilemma. But I can tell you that whatever you decide, it needs to be for you. Not for him, not out of obligation, not out of guilt. For your healing. Next, I called Madison. I'll support whatever you decide, she assured me. And if you want me to come with you, I will. Finally, I called my therapist, Dr. Chun, who had helped me navigate the aftermath of Richard's control. Consider what closure looks like for you, she suggested. Not what society says should happen between a dying man and his son, but what Ethan Miller needs to continue his journey toward wholeness. I thought about it for 3 days, turning the question over in my mind while continuing my normal routine, teaching classes, counseling students, planning my wedding with Madison, video calling my mother to help her choose plants for her garden. In the end, I decided to go. Not for Richard, but for myself. To look the man who had shaped my childhood through manipulation in the eye as an adult who had broken free. To close that chapter with intention rather than avoidance. Madison drove me to Silver Pines Recovery Center, a luxury facility disguised as a country estate. Richard would accept nothing less, even as his body failed him. She squeezed my hand before I got out of the car. Remember who you are, she said, not who he tried to make you. The facility smelled of disinfectant masked by expensive air fresheners. A nurse led me to a private room where Richard lay connected to machines, his skin yellowed with jaundice, his once imposing frame diminished by illness. He didn't notice me enter. His eyes closed as a machine quietly monitored his vital signs. I stood at the threshold, studying the man who had loomed so large in my nightmares. He looked small now, fragile, human. As if sensing my presence, his eyes opened. Recognition dawned slowly, then surprise. Ethan, he said, his voice a rasp of its former authority. You came. I moved into the room but remained standing, maintaining physical distance that symbolized the emotional boundaries I'd fought hard to establish. The doctor called. I said simply. He nodded weakly. I wasn't sure you'd come. After everything. I nearly didn't, I admitted. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us, filled only by the beeping of medical equipment. You look well, he said finally. I saw your article in the Journal of Clinical Psychology about childhood trauma and resilience. The revelation that he'd been following my career was unsettling. How did you know about that? A ghost of his old smile. I've kept tabs on you. From a distance, respecting the legal boundaries. Of course. Of course. Richard always operated within the technical limits of the law while violating its spirit. Why did you ask for me? I asked directly. He turned his face toward the window, where afternoon light illuminated the expensive landscaping of the facility grounds. I'm dying, Ethan. I wanted to see you once more. That's not an answer. He sighed. A rattling sound that reflected his deteriorating condition. I wanted to explain. To make you understand why I did what I did. I understand perfectly, I replied. You couldn't stand losing. So you used a child as a weapon against his mother. You manipulated, isolated, and psychologically abused me to punish her for leaving you. His yellowed face flushed slightly. It wasn't like that. I loved you. You were my son in every way that mattered. No, I corrected him, my voice steady. Sons aren't possessions. Love doesn't isolate and control. What you felt wasn't love, it was ownership. He closed his eyes, either from fatigue or to avoid my gaze. Is that what you tell yourself? That I was a monster? Is that easier than acknowledging that I gave you everything? The best education, opportunities, connections. At what cost? I asked. My relationship with my mother? My autonomy? My ability to trust? You didn't give me those things out of love, Richard. You gave them to create dependency. His eyes opened, anger briefly overcoming weakness. You've always been ungrateful, even as a child. I almost laughed at the predictability of his response. Gratitude was never what you wanted. You wanted obedience. We stared at each other, two adults now. The power dynamic forever altered. He looked away first. I've prepared for my passing, he said, changing tactics. My affairs are in order. There's a trust fund in your name. Several million. Enough to secure your future regardless of your career choice. One last attempt at control, offering financial strings that extended beyond the grave. I don't want your money, I said firmly. Give it to charity. Confusion crossed his face. The idea that someone would reject his wealth was incomprehensible to him. Don't be foolish. This is your inheritance. No, I corrected him. My inheritance is the resilience I built overcoming what you did to me. The capacity for genuine love I developed despite your example. The career helping others heal from people like you. Keep your money, Richard. I've built my own life. He seemed to shrink further into the hospital bed. The rejection of his final offering leaving him truly powerless for perhaps the first time in his life. Why did you come then? He asked, genuine bewilderment in his voice. To watch me die? To tell me you've succeeded without me? I considered the question, searching for the honest answer. I came to close this chapter of my life with intention, not avoidance. And maybe to see if there was anything human left in you, anything that understood the damage you caused. And is there, he asked, a vulnerability in his question I'd never heard before. I looked at him, really looked, and saw not the towering figure of my childhood fears but a broken man who had destroyed what mattered most because he couldn't control his own insecurities. I think there might be, I said finally. But it's too buried under years of justification and self-deception for you to access it now. He nodded slowly, accepting this assessment. Are you happy, Ethan? With your life? The question caught me off guard with its simplicity, its apparent sincerity. Yes, I answered truthfully. I'm happy. I have meaningful work. People I love who love me back, and freedom to choose my own path. Something passed across his face, regret, perhaps, or simply recognition of what he'd never achieved despite his wealth and power. Good, he said quietly. That's good. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of our shared past and divergent futures hanging between us. Finally, I stood to leave. Is this goodbye, then? He asked, an uncharacteristic uncertainty in his voice. Yes, I said gently. I think it is. He nodded, a single sharp movement. I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't believe in deathbed conversions. I wouldn't believe it if you did, I acknowledged. At the door, I paused and turned back to him. For what it's worth, Richard, I don't hate you anymore. That's not the same as forgiveness, but it's something. A ghost of his old smirk. Still the psychological insights. Old habits, I replied with a small smile of my own. I left then, walking through the hushed corridors of the facility and out into the bright afternoon, where Madison waited in the car. The weight I'd carried for so long felt different. Not gone, but transformed into something I could carry without being crushed. Richard died 6 weeks later. I didn't attend the funeral, but I sent flowers, not out of obligation or forgiveness, but as a marker of my own journey. The card read simply, the chains are broken. M. That night, my mother, Paul, Madison, and I had dinner together at my mother's house. We played video games afterward, my mother still terrible but enthusiastically committed to learning. As I watched her laugh with Madison, saw Paul's gentle support of her efforts, felt the warmth of the family we had rebuilt, I realized something profound. The darkest experiences of our lives don't have to define us. They can become the forge in which we create something stronger, something beautiful. The broken chains of my past had become the building materials of my future, a future built on truth, trust, and the freedom to choose my own path.